The Battle of Firebase Ripcord was a 23-day battle between the U.S. Army 101st Airborne Division and the North Vietnamese Army in early 1970. It was the last major confrontation between United States ground forces and the North Vietnamese Army. The battle took place in the A Shore Valley in Vietnam, not far from the city of Hue. 3 Medals of Honor and 6 Distinguished Service Crosses were awarded to participants for actions during these operations. Frank Marshall was one of the few survivors of the Battle of Ripcord.
Welcome to Burlington County College. My name is Mike Panarella, and I'm a retired teacher from the Lenape District. I represent the Armed Forces Heritage House Museum, and we're here to interview Mr. Frank Marshall. Mr. Frank Marshall is a Vietnam veteran. He's also a participant. He fought in the Battle of the Ripcord, which was one of the last and bloodiest battles of the Vietnam War. Frank, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'd like to start by asking you, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself, where you're from, things like that?
I grew up down in North Philly, the Italian section around 5th and Pike. Growing up, I went to Dobbins High School, took a trade up in there, and worked a little bit after school as a printer, and then I was drafted.
And what was the feeling at that time in Philadelphia and, about the war and Vietnam itself? What was going on like that time?
I didn't pay too much attention to it. I just figured if I got drafted, the war was ending and winding down. I said with my luck and the way I looked at life, I was working all the time since I was 11 years old, and I just figure if I go, my chances would be pretty good. I'll take my chances and see what happens. Then I went to right here at Fort Dix. Basic was at Bragg, AIT was at Fort Dix. And then they drafted me into the NCOC program for a non-commissioned officer candidate school.
How did you end up with 101st Airborne?
Well, after I got my orders for Vietnam, I came home on leave. Everybody was telling me that the story was all the same, all through the other veterans that were in there. They said, as long as if you go to Vietnam, as long as you don't get put with the 101st and you don't get sent up north, you're going to be fine, because the rest of the country was pretty quiet. But the up north, the 101st were the only ones that were fighting. Hamburger Hill had just happened in '69. In May of '69, Hamburger Hill happened. That was 101st Airborne. So everybody was telling me, stay out of there. You know, as long as you don't get with them, you're fine. But what happens is you go to Vietnam as a recruit, they put you in Long Binh down south, and then they send you to companies that are in need of men. So you don't know where you're getting assigned until you get there. And I got there, and I was assigned to 101st Airborne and flew up north.
Now, how were you armed? What was your weapon of choice? Or?
Originally, I was the M16. When I got there, I carried the M16, and when I went to my company, I did my training, and then I went out. And my first day out in the field, as I was going out to the field, we were going up in the mountains up towards the DMZ. The Marines were pulling out at that time, and we were tearing down all the fire bases because the monsoons were coming. So when the monsoons come, you leave the mountain areas. So I was flying out to a hilltop. My helicopter landed, and I got off. As my helicopter was landing, I looked out, and that was my first reality of Vietnam. The guys that were on the ground at that time in my company, they were bearded, long hair, dirty, muddy because it was raining. I just didn't want to get off the helicopter. All I could vision was Vic Morrow in the Combat series, because it was scary. So I landed, I got off the helicopter, and somebody grabbed me, one of the guys grabbed me that was on the LZ at that time, and they put me in a position overlooking a little creek, a ravine over a creek. It was about 4 foot high, and just said, stay here, look that way. If you see any movement, let us know. So the next helicopter coming in, was full of new guys again, and as that was landing, the helicopter got caught in some underbush, didn't land correctly, and started to tilt, to wobble. The two guys on the right side at the door fell off at that time. That made the helicopter even more unstabilized, and it tilted to the other side real quick, and those two guys on that door got scared and jumped off. So you have four guys trying to run away from the helicopter when it was tilting, and the blades from the helicopters chopped up four guys into pieces. That was my first day in the field.
And you saw that?
I felt something hit me in the back with a lot of force, and it threw me into the creek. And when I was getting up, because it was a four-foot embankment, and I was so scared at that time that when I started to climb up the embankment, I saw a 2-quart canteen that was right there and somebody's head that was right there. One of them hit me in the back and threw me into the creek.
Wow. Now, I wanted to isolate on the weapon you carried. You started with an M16 and you ended up with the M79 grenade launcher. Do you want to talk about that weapon itself?
Well, after that helicopter crash, then we all start moving out of the area. I was the M16, so I walked a couple days with them up and down the hills in different positions, and they decided to make me point man at that time. I have no sense of direction at all. I never, even as a kid, I had no sense of direction. And you spin me around, I'm lost. They gave me the M16, I had the M16, they made me walk point, I got the company lost.
The first time you were in an exchange of gunfire, your first time, your baptism of fire, can you talk me through that one?
The first time I got in fire, I was carrying the M79 grenade launcher. We got in contact and we got hit by a couple snipers who were out there shooting at us, and I was in the point squad. And naturally, you get down as low as you can to the ground. First thing you do, you get down, and bullets were passing through the leaves, and I could hear them going through the bushes right past my ears, and kind of scared me. And I had just started carrying the M79, so they yelled back, the point man yells back, send the 79 up. I didn't think anything, I said, here. They didn't like that too much, so they screamed a little bit at me and everything. I was just so scared I didn't know what to do, so not thinking I was going to pass the 79 up, but of course they meant with me, so I had to go up front and shoot.
Now, right before the interview, you were telling me about your battlefield experience, and you were listing the number of battles that you're in. Can you go through that one again?
The documented battles that I was in is 32 firefights. We had one hot LZ we landed on. I had 2 pretty large battles, and then one major battle at the end.
Mm-hmm. Now, with all that combat experience, and you said you were afraid, and did it ever change? I mean, did you always go in with the same feeling? Did you become number? Did it become automatic?
I was always numb, but I was always scared. No matter bullets firing at me, I was always scared. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, because almost every battle I always lost somebody that was next to me.
That's what I was getting to, and no one who's ever really been outside of combat, I mean, could understand what it would be like to be in combat. What was it like to see someone who maybe that you trained with, or you were eating with earlier, or you were talking with earlier, and have that person get wounded, hit?
You got to understand, when you're out, my company, and the way I was with the where I was at, we were in the field all the time. We were hardly ever in the rear. We'd go out to the field. You're supposed to go out no more than 30 days and come in for 3 days stand down. We were lucky if we were in there for one night overnight. We'd be out there a minimum in 3 to 4 weeks, easy, without coming back into the rear. and most of the time was 30, maybe 60 days. At that time, you're with, the only people you really know is your squad. In your squad, you had 2 fire teams. Each fire team usually spent the whole day and night together in positions. So you always had 2 or 3 guys with you the entire time. And you get to know the whole family. I mean, you're talking just like 24 hours a day you're out there beside this person. You're getting to know everything about them, from how they grew up to what they did to how they're feeling. And when they get hit, it's pretty hard.
Mm-hmm. What was it like when a new person came into your fire team or into your platoon?
Just like when I got there. As a new person, you're scared, you don't know what you're looking at, you don't know where you're going, you don't know the people you're with. As you get to know each other and you get in there, people rotated all the time. The problem with my company is most of us, the majority, all came in at the same time in October as replacements for this company that was empty. So most of us came in at the same time, but there were a lot that would rotate, every week or every month, whatever. When their time was up, they'd go home, then you get a new guy. And getting new people, you have to make sure that you can work together with them and they know how your team is working and you get them. We had one guy that came out that snored at night. We couldn't keep him. You'd have somebody come out that liked to smoke dope, and we didn't like that. So my guys, we were always in constant situations where we had to make sure nobody did any drugs or they weren't snoring, or that they can be with us. And if they weren't, then we'd have to send them out.
I guess the word I would use would be trust. I guess there's a certain...
You have to trust everybody that you're with.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I want to ask you, have you gone to the wall? And if so, what was it like to see the names of people who you were with?
I have quite a bit. I have over about 36 names that I was right beside that are on that wall. There are 14 in a row that were with me on the 22nd of July that died right in a row on the wall. I did not go to the wall when it opened. I did not go down until I met my guys and we went down there together. Close to 90, I guess, 1990, somewhere in that area.
If you can remember, and just to give the listening audience a feel, at that time, with Vietnamization and Nixon pulling troops back, there was the pressure from the NVA to speed up attacks. So basically, you're in a situation where we were pulling out of Vietnam, and then here comes probably one of the fiercest battles fought in the war. What was it like right before the battle?
Well, I got there in October and we worked the mountains until the monsoon came, like the end of November, beginning of December. And then we went back into the flatlands and we worked the flatlands all through the rains and the bad weather. And everything was okay. We hit a few firefights back and forth here and there, but it wasn't that bad. And January we were on a fire base in the flatlands at the base of the mountains, and that was a good time. So January and February were pretty good for me. At the end of February we start working back out in the lower mountain area.
Frank, I want to spend some time just letting you talk about the Battle of the Ripcord. What led up to it? Why did it occur?
Hamburger Hill happened in May 1969. They tried to take over a hill and they were trying to block the NVA from coming down into the Ho Chi Minh Trail and all in that area. They abandoned Hamburger Hill and then they waited until after the monsoons, and in 1970, on March 12th, 1970, my company, Alpha Company, the whole battalion was going to go back and take over that area at the mouth of the A Shaw Valley. On March 12th, my company went back to the rear that morning, loaded onto my whole company was waiting to go out on the helicopters to get out onto this hilltop It was a bare hilltop. We were going to open it up and make it a fire base. So my infantry company was to go out there and prep it and land, and the artillery and all that would come in afterwards. As we were in the sky, it was amazing. It must have been 30, 40 helicopters coming in the Hueys, about 30, 40 Hueys at a time in the sky, Cobras. We could see the Phantom jets bombing the hill, everything else, prepping it. And we were going out to land on this hill. But the weather and the fog was interrupting it. Now, they had planned for us to go into this hill to start the operation. While we were in the air and we couldn't land on that hill because of the weather, they changed us to go over to another hilltop at that time. Mid-air, they made a decision to divert that plan and go on to another hilltop. As we were landing, I was one of the first helicopters to land on March 12th onto this bare hilltop. As we were landing, it turned into a hot LZ. We got mortared and RPG'd, and they were just hitting us left and right. At that point, my platoon was the first in, and we took a lot of casualties. I lost my lieutenant. I lost a couple men from my squad. It was pretty bad landing, and as the companies the rest of the company tried to come in, they were having a hard time getting in. At that time, when I got off the helicopter, the red smoke, it had just turned to red smoke as I was landing, and the two guys on the edge of the helicopter ran in between a rock. They got hit with a RPG. We went down, my squad went down to knock out the machine gunner, and I was the grenade launcher to knock him out. We continued fighting for that hill the rest of the day. We had the Phantom jets, the bombers come in, and they were bombing the area and everything around us. We finally when it got quiet, we moved off the hill. So we went into different positions on different hilltops and different valleys around that hill.
Now, why did it turn into a 3-month battle? What did the NVA, but by the way, the Viet Cong basically had ceased to exist by this time, and it was basically North Vietnamese regulars. Why did it evolve in such a long battle?
Well, when we tried to take this hill to set up the fire base, there were approximately, we didn't know it at the time, but the NVA were saturated in the area. We had a company of 126 men at that time, Alpha Company, when we were going in there with 4 platoons. We ended up losing a full platoon of men that day, and we went down to 3 platoons, divided up the company into 3 platoons. As we were trying to take this hill, there was continual fighting. Now, the rest of the companies in the battalion were also around the area in the valleys and the base of the hills. They were continually getting hit. We found out later that there was over 10,000 NVA in the area. So they were fighting for this hilltop, the same as we were. We continued to fight there. Now on April 1st, it was the April Fool's Day assault. Bravo Company went in to try to open up the hill on April 1st. They did not succeed. They took a lot of casualties. April 15th, Charlie Company finally went in and got the hill open. They started bringing in the artillery and everything at that point. Now, they continued to get hit by the NVA with RPGs and mortars, and they finally got the hill saturated with artillery and everything else they wanted to set up, and an infantry company up on the hill while the other companies worked the base of the ground. We were continually having firefights, running into the enemy. This went on. You had, that was April, and then May and June, continually fighting was still around trying to take control of this base, but the NVA kept bringing more and more troops down there. It ended up they had about 40,000 troops around us. We only had about 600 to 800 at the most at any one time in that area of Americas. we continued to fight, and then it got really heavy. The end of May, Alpha Company was out in an area, and we got hit again. And at that time, Chuck Norris, the actor, his brother, Wheeling Norris, was with us in Alpha Company. He started to walk point one day, and he got hit and killed. Now, that is the only time that they're acknowledging that was the Battle of Ripcord. Now, July 1st, the NBA started hitting pretty hard. And in mid-July, the lieutenant of the artillery was Bob Kelso, who was the Buffalo Bills. Mm-hmm. He played for Buffalo Bills, and he was drafted, and he ended up taking his time. He said he'd go because he knew he had to serve his time. But on June 4th, we were walking up a hilltop, and we got ambushed. And I was the M79er, and I went up on line to throw to shoot the M79 out there. Mm-hmm. And I took shrapnel on my back at that time, and I ended up in the hospital for about 3 days.
Was that from a mortar round?
From a grenade.
From a grenade. Mm-hmm.
And I took the shrapnel, kept me in the hospital about 3 to 5 days I was out. I went back to the company and continued on. And then July 1st, we were starting to hit contact almost every day. We were watching the NBA walk around us because I was not on the fire base. I was, again, around in the valleys and at the base of the fire base. The fire base Ripcord was taking rounds every day. They were getting a lot of casualties up there. I was down around in the base of the hilltop. We were watching the NBA walk around us the entire time. We were hitting them, and they were hitting us. And then on the morning of July 22nd, we were down to 76 men. We were on a small hilltop that wouldn't keep the 3 platoons. Our platoon was to walk, say, north to go to fire base. They were going to get extracted now, because at this time we were taking too much hits, and all the other companies were in the rear. Bravo Company was up on the fire base. They were getting ready to evacuate them. The NVA had us outnumbered. The military was cutting back on our artillery shells and our ammunition. We were getting low on that, so they figured we'd just abandon the hill. So they were going to pull us out on the 22nd, pull everybody off the base on the 23rd. At that point, as we started to walk down, my captain got orders to turn around and walk the other way and get to the closest closest LZ to be extracted. That time, 2nd platoon started to walk down the hill. Our platoon, 1st platoon, started to walk back up the hill. Now it's 1st platoon and 3rd platoon on top of this little hilltop, pretty close quarters there. And 2nd platoon, as they started to walk down the hill, they walked right into the NVA that was setting up to attack us. At that time, there was 400 NVA surrounding us. They came up 3 sides on us. As soon as they got hit, the 2nd platoon got hit, they start dropping mortars on us. The mortars were landing on top of the hill. Before the last mortar stopped, the NVA were already on top of us. We were close encountered, and we just separated all different ways to dive into cover. Leaving our rucksacks up on top of the hill, everything up on top of the hill, we dove for cover. The NVA were already on top. The wounded that were left, they were wounded from the mortar rounds. The NVA was walking around the top of the hill shooting our wounded in the head. And we were shooting, we were just fighting, and we fought them all day long.
Is this where you got the Bronze Star for one of your commendations?
Yes. I was, at that point with the cluster, we started to regroup as I was coming around the hill there. my medic was laying down on the ground wounded, and I ran up to him. As I was running over to him and laying beside him, an MVA was right in front of me and dropped a satchel charge down on us, which is a little explosive. And he threw that down on us, and it hit the medic right in the back and blew up in my face, and I fell back down the hill again. And as I was blinded and in a concussion state, my guys grabbed me, smacked me around a little bit, and woke me up and told me to get back up the hill. So I turned around and I start running back up the hill. And I was all by myself, and I was yelling for first platoon. The other guys that I was with, they were yelling they were over there. As I started to run over there, there was an MVA in between us shooting at me. So I told them, don't shoot, it's me. They said, no, it's an MVA in between. At that point, he pointed his M16 right at me, and one of my guys shot him in the back, and he went down. And I got hit at that time with an RPG. The shrapnel sliced open my arm, and my finger went right to my bone in there. I could feel it. And I went down at that time. A medic came by and grabbed me and wrapped me up. My next wave of guys coming up beside me got me and picked me up, and we started to run back up the hill again. And at that point, I got hit in the leg, the ankle bone, and I went down again. And then one of the guys from my squad picked me up, carried me up behind a tree. At that time, we had Cobras running all around us, and the Cobra fired pretty close and hit one of our guys. At that point, the MVA was still coming up the hill, so my captain was calling in 250-pound bombers from the Phantom jets, walking them up the hill. Wasn't stopping them, so he called in and he said, drop it right on top of us. So we called in danger close, and a 250-pound bomb dropped right on top of us. At that point, that scared the MVA away. At that point, we had 56 wounded and 14 dead out of 76. There was only 6 guys left that could fight.
Unfortunately, I have to draw the end of that one. Did that medic make it, the original one? To get
No, he died.
I'm sorry.
We had 14 dead that day.
I want to, and I don't want cutting you off as much as that, but do you have any idea on the amount of casualties you inflicted on the enemy?
We have no idea. Delta Company came in the next morning and rescued us when they came in. Mm-hmm. They landed on another hilltop and walked over to us, and the point men and everybody in that company said they just continually was walking up. I ended up in the hospital for 6 weeks after I got hit, and then I had 2 weeks left in country, and I went back to the rear, and then I came home.
What was it like coming home?
I took off my clothes, nobody respected you, and it was a pretty bad feeling, and I just put it behind me. Mm-hmm. I kept it in my mind. In the back of my mind it was there, but it bothered me every night, but I didn't talk about it to nobody.
Now, a lot of people are now familiar with things that were foreign to them back then, like PTSD and flashbacks. When did things like that start to affect you?
It never left me. From the time I got home, it was there. It was like I tried to ignore it, but you can't forget something that happened to you as bad as that.
Now you're in your 60s. What are your nights like?
They're not as bad now because I believe that because the guys I were with and myself are so close that we have each other to fall back on.
Mm-hmm. Now you're part of quite a few organizations, and there's been a documentary now made on the Battle of Ripcord, in which you're a key figure in that, and now also a movie. Would you like to talk about the documentary real quickly?
Temple University did a documentary on it. It's coming along very good. It should be completed by the end of this year, 2013.
Or is it a culture shock to come home to a country that was that divided over the war?
There were a lot of Vietnam veterans that came home that felt like they should protest, and a lot of veterans that came home thought they saw no sense in the protest. I was one of the guys that saw no sense in the protest. But I was kind of like, whatever they want to do. That's what we fight for, is to give each person a chance to say what they want to say.
As an educator and person who is involved in these interviews, you need to be welcomed back. You need to be recognized as the hero, the patriot, the American that you are, the country that abandoned you should not have done that. So I guess I would like to say on behalf of Burlington County College and all the students that I represent, I'd like to welcome you back and really apologize for a country that did something to you that shouldn't have done. And I really believe that with all my heart, that that we made a mistake, that the country didn't treat you the way you should have. That when people came back from World War II, they were celebrated heroes. You were just as much a part of the history as they are. So from a country that now is appreciating what you did, I'd like to welcome and thank you for your sacrifice and your contribution to our country. On behalf of Burlington County College, I would like to thank them for allowing us to do this interview. I also would like to recognize the Armed Forces Heritage House Museum and the efforts that we're going to try to make now to bring history to life. I'm Mike Panarella, and thank you for this interview. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.